Hey, and welcome to Matt and Jess TV. I am Matt Roast here with Jessica Bun. This is our reaction and review for Under the Bridge episode 5. We are now in a spot where the story, it's really picking up. We already know who the killer is. It's not as though Rebecca and Cam necessarily know who the killer is at this point, but we are picking up momentum to where the truth is going to be revealed, but this show, in the process of all this, is staying in as dark and I think as bleak and difficult of a position as it's been since the start.
Yeah, and in this episode, it looks like Warren's got some heat on him as well. He had his big confession in this episode to Rebecca about his involvement in Rena's actual death. He was there.
Yeah, this, I'll say from the start, this is a show I'm kind of developing more and more complicated feelings about over time because it continues to be, I think, extremely well acted. But this is also a situation where I feel like, to me, the more I'm learning about the reality of Rena's case in the process of, learning more about this fictionalized version, I'm having a really hard time sort of separating the two. And I'm kind of coming out of this feeling a little bit just conflicted and distracted by this idea that there's so much on the show that's being created for the show, and it's starting to come up with this: what is real, what is fictional, what is this show ultimately, I think, trying to tell us? And that's this
Yeah.
difficult spot I'm left in.
Yeah, it's tough because, there's a lot of it that is very real and happened, and then the show has said that there are some things that have been changed for TV adaptation. And while I understand that, and sometimes you have to do that, and it's also very difficult then for people that don't know the case or might want to learn about the case, but you're really learning like most of it's true. It's like oh, 80% is real or 85% is real, but some characters aren't or are, or you don't know, right? Hopefully, what this will do is it'll encourage people to then go and read about Rena's story and learn more about what really happened.
Yeah, and we're going to get a little bit more into all that, and of course, the events of this episode primarily as well. But before we do, be sure to hit that subscribe button because we will be here through all of Under the Bridge. We're going to take you through everything by subscribing. You guys also help to support us
Mhm.
to be able to make these videos that we really love to do so much for you.
Yes, thank you so much to everyone who has subscribed. It really does
Yeah.
help us.
Okay, I want to start with Cam just because this is the character I'm the most fascinated by, but also the most distracted by in a way, because I know Cam is basically a creation, a composite in a lot of ways. Like, this is not an actual person that was around. And I didn't know this when I first started the show. This is just something that, I've kind of taken this ride of research as this show has gone along. And so I'm sort of left now with this question of, okay, why Cam? Why is this character specifically being constructed for this show? And I think a lot of it is coming down to this idea of them wanting to show different reactions when it comes to Rena's case and how
Hmm.
different sides are approaching it so that we can sort of understand why the police struggled with it in some ways, why Rebecca struggled with it with some ways. And I think with Cam, they're trying to show multiple sides within that because they're trying to show, okay, she's still a police officer. There's a lot of inherent distrust that goes along with that, but she's also a somewhat sympathetic figure when it comes to comparing her to other people within the police. So there's a lot that they're trying to say with her, and I hope it's not taking away too much from the investigation that's going on with Rena. Like, it's complicating my head a little bit, but I still like Cam as a character. I still enjoy watching her.
I actually wish that there was more of Cam and more of her side of digging into the case. Like, I hate to say that I'm not enjoying the Rebecca story as much as I was when we first started the show, where I was kind of like, okay, this is an interesting angle. Rebecca is the writer of the actual book, Under the Bridge. So it's all kind of connects around. Like, okay, it's interesting that they've put her into the story in this way and her relationship with Cam and all of that, but it always makes me very, very uncomfortable watching adults with teens trying to gain their trust by doing things that they would do as teens. And I mean, she was self-aware by the end of this whole thing where she was kind of like, "Hey guys, if you guys want to get away, I'm here to help you. I'll help you, take a bus to Mexico." I was
Yeah.
just like, this is such an unbelievable story. Like, it feels like she's like, "Hey, fellow kids, I'm here to help you get
Yeah.
away with crime. You should just flee and go to Mexico. Here's $60. Oh, you need to get a little more money? No problem. Hey, what about any evidence you might have on what you did with Reena?" I was like, she is so bad at this. And I just it was so cringy and it was so difficult to watch. But I mean, by the end of it, when she realizes that Kelly's like, "Yeah, listen, I need to just go pick up some more money and then we'll be on our way. Why don't you come with us?" And she brings them to this warehouse where there's a bunch of bad kids that
Yeah.
are all there doing some bad stuff that it's just like, uh-oh, she's in huge trouble now, and Kelly has completely set her up. I don't know what Rebecca was thinking in this situation. Like, if she thinks that any of these young girls have killed somebody, then why are you getting in a car with them and going somewhere with them? If you know that they're capable of murder, then why wouldn't they be capable of murdering you? And then having her in this situation where it's like, "Oh, well, you're the adult in the room, and if you're not really a cop," which is what Kelly's trying to set up with everyone else is there. It's like, "Oh, you brought a cop here? Like, why would you do that?" Or somebody who's related to being a cop will prove that you're not a cop. Okay, then Warren steps up and is like, "All right, take this." I'm like, oh my goodness. Like, it's so cringy to watch. It's one of my least favorite things to watch on TV is adults trying to get in with teenagers. Like, you got to find another way. You're still the adult. You can't be in there doing drugs with teenagers. Stop it.
Yeah, Rebecca did a bad job. I don't know how else to sort of say it other than that. I think she clearly felt way more superior about her abilities than what the actual truth here was. Like
Yeah,
maybe,
I mean, at one point she compared herself to Capote.
yeah, okay. Which there is a part of me that I appreciate just because like that's something that I think I said in an earlier video
Hmm.
that there's a lot of like similarities to how
Yes.
Capote tried to do things with In Cold Blood. But yeah, the difference with In Cold Blood was that Truman Capote was an adult trying to get in and understand another adult. And beyond just that, he was trying to get in and understand somebody who had already been brought in, who had like everything was much more set in stone. He was not driving around anybody to various things, helping them as try to escape to Mexico. He wasn't taking things being offered by Warren. It's a very different situation. And I think she really just got too hopped up on her own sauce and thought that she was really good at this, that she was going to figure all of this stuff out. And this is, once again, I don't know if this is what the real Rebecca did in this moment to try to get in with these people, but it just feels like to me it's any sort of analogy to I was once a teenager, so I understand what teenagers are like. It's like somebody who scored a touchdown in a high school football game 10 years ago, going back to high school, hanging out with these other football kids and being like, "Hey, do you guys want to know how to score a touchdown like I did?" It's like, number one, it's your move on, dude. It was 10 years ago. For another thing, everybody acts differently. There's different plays now. It doesn't line up. So I think Rebecca's ego is getting massively in the way. I'm glad this did not work. It would be so unbelievable if it did.
The only thing that ended up coming together was her being sort of on this trip now with Warren, and they do create enough of a bond, and he has enough guilt, it seems, that he confesses to her that he was there when Rena was killed, that he watched Kelly do this, that he did try to say stop or whatever, but it seems like he didn't actually move in to do anything further than that. So he is involved.
And that's where I think a lot of the guilt just comes from, and that you know something really bad is happening, even if you were troubled yourself. you're not stepping up and trying to do something about it? Is it because of, fear, X, Y, and Z? It doesn't really matter. It's
Well, he's
still,
also a really young
yeah.
person, you know. I've said this so many times, but being a teenager really sucks. And you don't know who you are. You don't know what you can do.
Mhm.
You're in between being a child and being an adult, but you're not quite an adult yet. And you're reminded of it all the time. You're not an adult. You're not an adult. So it's kind of like, okay, well, like, where can you step in and what can you do in these types of situations where you're also not going to get hurt?
It's a really funny thing how this show has two pretty reasonably big stars, Riley Keough and Lily Gladstone, at the center of it, and yet I think the most fascinating part of the show are the kids. I think this is what Under the Bridge is doing the best, and sort of shaping how would these people act in these situations. And it's inevitable that you're going to have a Warren, a somebody else who, has their own fair share of troubles, but also
Mhm.
still has a certain element of guilt that in the right place at the right time, they're going to say some stuff because they just can't keep it together anymore. And that's the situation he finds himself in.
Maybe. I mean, that's the story that he told Rebecca while he was on drugs. So, is that actually the story? Is that actually what happened? We have to remember that we saw Warren at his girlfriend's place putting bloody clothes in a washing machine, and that he did admit that he kicked Rena when everybody was there doing it. But now we know that he was also here with Kelly. So, was there another bit of involvement before then? Because his story is basically that, they followed her and then Kelly beat her up again and then Kelly did everything.
The other problem on top of all of this, including, as you said, him being under the influences of certain something, is none of this is admissible. It's information that Rebecca can know, but she's not a police officer. He's clearly influenced by. It's like there is a double whammy of really bad news here when it comes to actually getting information. And it's a contrast in a way to Cam in this episode ends up having this scene with Dusty where, Dusty writes out, quote unquote confession, but it's something that's clearly done under a certain amount of duress where it's just like, okay, she's just confessing something to have something down on paper, and that's really it.
Yeah, because Kelly comes up with this great plan where she's like, okay, we won't go to Mexico. Instead, we're gonna, roll the bus over somebody else.
Yeah.
She knows that Warren was there. So if she can put Warren there, then they can just roll the bus over him. They call in, they give these confessions. Cam, finally is sitting down with Dusty after Dusty feels like the character on the show that is feeling the most guilt, that she is really trying to like maybe change things around, but she just is in this position that she can't. She is absolutely part of all of this. She did this to Rena under the bridge as well. She was part of the whole beating up situation, but she does feel this guilt. She wants to go back with her mom. She wants to try to change things around. We also learned that Dusty had done something to one of her sisters, held a knife to her, and that's why she's in Seven Oaks. So by the time Cam comes around to pull her out of the apartment, she's like, listen, we heard your guys' calls. You guys are all saying that's Warren. Here, if you write down Warren's name, just so you know, if you lie about this, you're going to be in huge trouble. And she does it anyways. It's Warren.
I think what's so fascinating just about this moment is that I think Cam knows that what is happening here with Dusty is just not the truth. I think she's able to read Dusty well enough to see her desperation, to sort of recognize, okay, we're getting something, but it's a hollow victory in a lot of ways. I mean, we haven't watched ahead or anything, but just like my tinfoil hat theory, just
Mhm.
as someone who, well, it's hard to really confront the accuracy of this part in particular when we're talking about a fictionalized character, but I feel like where this show is going to go with this is that Cam is going to try to bring up some suspicion here that, okay, we don't really have the truth. But I feel like other people in the department are now going to be like, okay, we've got a confession here. Warren did it. We have enough evidence. Let's just put Warren away. We've got our person. The community can start to heal. But then the problem is that's not really the truth. And that's where Cam is going to have to try to find some other angle. And that's hopefully where Rebecca can help if she can find a way to try to get more information.
Maybe. I mean, like I said, this was for me the weakest episode with the Rebecca character. I'm ready to see the Cam character get back in there and be able to just do her work the way that she's able to kind of get things out as well, because she has been able to figure things out without Rebecca, and I would like to see a little bit more of that. This was the big Rebecca episode. I'd like to see the next big Cam episode, especially now that we're in this situation where Dusty has written down that it's Warren. She has
Yeah.
confirmed that it's Warren. Then she has gone back to Seven Oaks, and Kelly is laughing and bragging about what she's done to Reena and how she thinks it's funny. And it's enough to set Dusty off to go over and punch her. And of course, somebody comes in and
Yeah.
it's only Dusty's fault, of course, right? But then we have this situation where Joe and Kelly realize that Dusty might be cracking, and that if she hasn't already told the police the truth, that they have to do something about it. So we have this really gripping cliffhanger
Yeah.
where we have them asking Dusty if they want to actually go to Mexico, being like, listen, it's worse than we think it is. We think we need to go to Mexico. Pack a bag. I'm like, oh no, Dusty, no.
Yeah, this is not looking great for Dusty, but I also have another just question here about Joe and how far Joe is going to be willing to sort of push things, because she is very much all about talking up her game, like how, formidable she is, how she wants to be this sort of, criminal mastermind. But at the end of the day, Kelly's the one who actually killed Reena.
Yes.
I think there's a breaking point to Josephine. I don't know when exactly it's going to be. I don't know if it's going to be tied to Dusty or not, but I think we're eventually going to get to a point on this show where Kelly is going to take things a step too far, even for Joe. And Joe is then going to have to realize, what can I do at this point? I'm already so far into this. There's no way I can make any of my quote unquote dreams come true anymore. If I do something to cross Kelly, she's going to take me out. I'm not going to have any sort of recourse. And I'm just wondering when we are going to get there. Is it just going to be when Kelly does too many things to too many people that Joe quote unquote cares about?
Or it might just be doing something in front of her. I think for Joe, it's one thing to be, beating somebody up, and
Yeah.
then it's another thing to watch somebody be killed in front of you. And if that's the case where Joe thinks she's in a desperate moment, she's like, okay, Kelly, like, we got to deal with Dusty. Let's tell her we got to go to Mexico, and then we'll deal with it, or you can deal with it. That might be the breaking point of her watching Kelly about to do something to Dusty, who's a friend of hers too. They've all been in there together a while.
Okay, we're 18 minutes in. I'm just gonna ask this question now, and we'll see where things go in the comments, because I've been thinking about this a lot the past couple of days. Would Under the Bridge have been more successful if the entire story was fictionalized and they just put at the start of it that this is based on what happened to Reena Virk, as opposed to what they're doing, which is a somewhat true story with a lot of fictionalized elements added into it? It seems like the show, at least to me, is trying to kind of have its cake and eat it too. And that's where some of the distraction is coming in, because they've already fictionalized so much that I'm finding myself watching it being like, okay, what's true and what's not, versus you could have done a documentary. You could have done something totally fictionalized, but just capturing the essence of it. I'm not sure what is right, but it's a question that's on my mind now.
Okay, let's talk about, as we wrap this up,
Yeah.
Reena and Reena's dad,
Yeah.
because we did have this scene sort of in the past where Reena and Joe, it's her first night there and she's having a hard time, and Josephine comes in and they're sharing a drink and they're sharing stories and they're really bonding. Like, it's kind of the only time we've seen those two like really bond.
Yeah.
Then the next day we have this situation where Kelly is back in charge again. She's got control over Josephine. Josephine can't be friends with Reena as she seems to want to be, or that there was a natural connection there. And we see a lot of regret happening with Rena. So she goes back to her house and tries to get in. It's like, listen, I need to get my coat. Her dad's like, I'm not allowed to open the door. I'm not allowed to be near you. I'm really sorry, but this is where it is. I don't trust you. And that seems to really affect her. Like she walks away from the door and sits on the steps, and he opens the door and he throws the jacket out and shuts the door, where she realizes like just how much she has hurt him, hurt herself, hurt her family. She can't come home. Like she's destroyed everything, that we actually see her writing out a letter to the crown to be like, I lied.
This is heartbreaking, like absolutely soul crushing, difficult stuff to watch. It's what this show is doing the best job at, and that
Yes.
is explaining every aspect of Rena's story, both good and bad. This is where, to me, they're justifying the okay, this is a true story with fictionalized elements, because they've really, I think, nailed the psychology of a young person who is in a really bad situation, who kind of finds himself being pushed and all of these different levels. Like there's something about Rena at the end of the day where, she does fundamentally care about people, but she's just also so desperate to fit in and not be, given a hard time to at school, that
Yeah.
she goes to these horrible extremes.
And I think the thing, when you're a teenager, you don't see everything that's going
Yeah.
on. Even as an adult, you don't see everything that's going on. But the thing that she doesn't see that's going on in the past before everything is happening under the bridge is that Kelly is a very jealous person. That, when we saw that whole situation play out with the couch, she straight up was just like, no. She's my best friend. You don't sit here. You don't get access to her. And Josephine falls in line. Like Kelly's jealousy over everything, Rena, having, a close family, what she's wearing in the boots, and, getting close to Josephine, and her really trying to like build herself up for Josephine, so Josephine will continue to be her best friend. She keeps saying, "I did this for you. I'm doing this for you. Anything for you." That this really is about keeping her friendship.
Yeah, and it's something that Rena's struggling to understand. I mean, I think it'd be hard for a lot of people to understand what's going on with Kelly in this position, but I think what Rena does understand is this idea of, here is somebody who did put a jacket for me outside after I
Mhm.
tried to come inside. This is somebody who is doing something for me despite everything that I have done to them, and I think she's coming to grips to some extent that there is an element of unconditional love there. But the problem that unfortunately persists through all of her life is just that she's got this pull of, I got to fit in elsewhere. I got to be with these other people. This is how I want to define my identity. And she never finds a way to escape that.
No.
It's really, really sad. That's the hard show.
This is a very hard show. It's a very good show. It has some problems with it, but in general, it is such a hard show to watch. Like
Yeah.
I always leave an episode and I'm feeling like worse and worse. It's so bleak and so grim.
This is probably the most grim I felt consistently week to week since The Handmaid's Tale. And The Handmaid's Tale hasn't been on the air in a long time, so I
Yeah.
haven't felt this way in a while.
Yeah.
It's tough though, but it is very much worth watching. Has
Mhm.
some issues, but I'm very curious to see how they put everything together. If you guys want to see more of our Under the Bridge coverage, be sure to check that box right there. Also subscribe for more updates. Join our Patreon as well.
Yeah.
Thank you so much to our patrons for your
Thank you.
support. We'll see you here next time.